Welcome, everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar, Before Slavery's presentation of the Black Israelites in Africa. I am Pat Snipes, the founder of the Vibrant Health Association, which is the sponsor for today's event, on behalf of our special project, Before Slavery. It will be a new Black History Museum that we are building in the Metro Atlanta area. And as we continue to grow this exhibition, we're working on building the space. So I welcome you to give freely of your heart to help us to do that. Today, we welcome our highly respected guest, Dr. Magdel LeRouxs. She's a professor in Biblical and Ancient Studies at the University of South Africa. Dr. LeRoux has written a book called The Lemba, A Lost Tribe of Israel in Southern Africa. Special thanks to our moderator, who is Modesta Kambinda. She's a gifted and dedicated scholar of her own right, highly valued in our group for Before Slavery. She's a graduate of Spelman College here in the Atlanta metro area with a degree in international studies. She went back home to Zimbabwe, and she's working with us from there. Modesta will be joining us any moment now. Because as you probably are already aware, sometimes the technology is not as consistent in certain parts of the world as others. So as soon as she can, she will join us. Meanwhile, I am happy to introduce and very excited about welcoming our guest, Dr. Magdel LeRouxs. Dr. LeRoux?
Thank you very much, Pat. It's a privilege to be here. I'm also very excited about your project, and I hope that you will be very successful, and I'm sure that many more people will join you in this project and support as much as possible.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, Dr. LeRoux, as I said, she's a professor of Biblical and Ancient Studies at the University of South Africa. Her academic interests are in the areas of the Old Testament, biblical archaeology, pre-monarchic Israel, the tribes of Israel, Africa and the Bible, and ancient Near Eastern studies. Her specialties include Iron Age archaeology, the Book of Judges, and Israelite groups in Africa. She has written extensively on this subject matter, and her, especially the Lemba, and she's conducted special projects under archaeological excavations, which is very exciting, something I've always dreamed of doing, in Israel, archaeological excavations in Greece, Greco-Oriental and African Studies, and the International Society of the Study of African Jewry. So in our works, many ethnic groups in Africa have proclaimed connection to ancient Israel, and their tribal history shows that. And these communities respect the Sabbath, they eat kosher, they circumcise the male children on the 8th day, they celebrate the biblical feasts, and many other cultural attributes that date back thousands of years. I refer to the Igbo of Nigeria, the House of Israel in Ghana, the Lemba of South Africa and Zimbabwe, the Abuba in Congo, the people in Uganda. I've never been able to say that properly, so I'm not even going to try. The Tutsi of Rwanda and Burundi, the Cabo Verde Israelites, and many other communities, and the list goes on and on. So today we're talking about Professor LeRoux's book and some other things. So I'd like to, if you don't mind, Dr. Magdel, just jump right into some questions with you.
Sure.
Okay. So what was it about this area of study that attracted you? What struck your interest?
Yes, of course, it's a long story, but I'll try to be short. I was always interested in African history and history per se. So I did my honors in Old Testament studies and, of course, archaeology as well. But then I did a master's in the tribes of Israel in the Book of Judges. And while I was busy doing that, my father bought a farm in the northern parts of South Africa, on the border close to Zimbabwe.
Mm.
And we visited a neighbor just by, to introduce ourselves and so on. And this Mr. Piet Wessels said to me, "Now, sister, what are you doing for a life?" And I said, "I'm studying." At that stage, I was married, I had children already, but I said, I'm studying, I'm doing a master's on the tribes of Israel and so on. He said, "But you must come and study these people on my farm." I said, "Tell me more." And he said, "You won't believe it. They've got a tradition that they originally came from Israel. They're very secretive. They are very exclusive. And they celebrate their rituals and feasts and stuff every year at the annual meeting." And so I was hooked immediately. I said, "Please, may I come and visit? May I interview them?" And then he referred me to Professor Matiba. He was the president of the Lemba Cultural Association at that stage. And he really became like a father to me. I visited him many times. I stayed with him. And at the next, and that was in that after I just wanted to say, I've completed my master's. And then in 1995, later on, I visited him and I said to him, "Professor, I want to investigate your people's story." And he was immediately said, "You know what? This is now 1995. Let us tell everybody our story." Because they were very secretive, as I've said, because they didn't want to be to stand out, in the apartheid area. And then they were part of the struggle. So they were a bit secretive, and they wanted to not to be recognized or kind of be known as a group that's not belong to Africa.
Mm-hmm.
So in any case, the point is, he said at the next Lemba Cultural Association annual meeting, he announced, I'm going to write down their history, and please support Professor well, no, I wasn't professor at that stage. Please support Mrs. LeRoux at that stage to write down our story. The world should know our story. Please support her in any way. Answer any question that she asks you. And fortunately, I didn't ask enough, but I did write down their history, and this is my book. I don't know if you can see it. But at the end, what really is very comforting to me is the fact that before he died, I think he died in 2002, 2003. Before that, I gave him a copy of my book. And of course, it was my doctorate, but I published it. And he said this was the best rendering of their story that he had seen. So he was really satisfied, and I was so pleased that he could see that before he died.
Wow, that's beautiful. What a beautiful story. So just give us, please, like a brief understanding of who are the Lemba, where did they come from?
Okay, once again, I'll try to be short. With my research, I mean, that was since 1994, 95, started with my doctorate. And I've decided not to read anything that they have written. I just want to interview that was written about them. I wanted to interview them. I want to hear the story from them.
Yes.
And of course, it was frowned upon in my department of Old Testament. They said, but this is not a hardcore Old Testament, topic, because I wanted to compare my masters, what I did on the tribes of Israel, with this group. I've decided to take them seriously and to write down all their manners and customs and oral traditions. And so to put everything together in a nutshell, it seems like the Lemba were Israelites. They also say, we are children of Abraham. We worship the God of the Bible. We once had a book, but it was destroyed by the Muslim. We came from a place, the oldest recorded oral tradition of the Lemba holds that they were Israelite ancestors. Their Israelite ancestors came by boat to Africa from a remote place called Sena, but they did on the other side of the Pusela, but they didn't know where it was. From the north, came by boat to Africa as traders, but they couldn't remember exactly from where it was, but they know that they were masters of gold, iron, traders, and so on. So they call the names that they give, are given as, of course, the Lemba. They don't know what it is or what it is. Lemba. Somebody said to me, it could be, it means to refuse. Others says, actually, they also tell the story that they were Israelites, they were Jews, black Jews. Some people call them black Jews. Actually, one of the first presidents of in South Africa, President Paul Kruger, he was quite known during the Anglo-Boer War. He first recognized the Lemba people in public as Jews, as the black Jews of South Africa. So they were very pleased with that. Others, they also call them the chosen people, the good men, the Mwenji, the Basena people coming from Sena. So that is more or less the history. So they actually came to Africa. Why? They left the place in Sena because they escaped most probably the Babylonian exile into the Arabian Peninsula. There they mingled with the Arabian traders and typical traders, as they still are. They came to Africa to erect trading posts on the east coast of Africa. Then at a stage, they couldn't go back to Yemen, to the eastern Hadramaut, where they rebuilt Sena, and they had to stay in Africa, and they did not bring their wives with, to teach them not to do that, eh? Always take your wife with. But in any case, so in Africa, they had to take wives. They took wives from the African people on the east coast of Africa, exactly where we don't know, but most probably close to Mozambique and Great Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe. And here from then, they actually practiced endogamy. They took those wives, and since then they keep those same people in their tribe. Of course, many other people saw them on the east coast of Africa. They became the traders, the middlemen because they came from Arabia, and they were the middlemen between the Arabian traders with Africa and the African people. Very skilled traders, goldsmiths, workers, iron and copper, and the melting processes.
Mm-hmm.
They are still, yeah.
That's powerful. That's powerful. So, settlements also on the east coast of Africa. So I know not too far north from there, we hear of Israelites living in Ethiopia. Going back to the time of who was connected with King Solomon back in that time. Can you tell us anything about the Israelites in Ethiopia?
Yes, of course. It's a fascinating story. Really, I mean, I can keep you busy. Many from in my interviews in Zimbabwe, specifically, some of the people told me that we are descendants of Solomon and Sheba, the Queen of Sheba, and that the mines of King Solomon, of course, was in as far down as in Zimbabwe. There are so many remains, and that will Modesta can tell us more about that. I saw her just now.
She's here.
She's there. But many ancient gold mines in Zimbabwe area and Mozambique. So there's also some evidence that they got some frankincense and some antimony from Zimbabwe. There's nowhere else that you can get it than in Zimbabwe. So there are many interesting theories surrounding that they definitely came, the Queen of Sheba and even Solomon, or even the Egyptians. Remember, the Egyptians were the people, the seafarers for the Israelites, and well, actually they came down on the east coast from Africa, and they definitely traded as far down as Zimbabwe and Mozambique area. So the connection with Ethiopia is not so clear, but you know the story about the Queen of Sheba who went to Israel and she met Solomon and the history. So they had a son together and so on and so on. But it seems that the Lemba, perhaps some say that the boat came to Ethiopia. Others said they came further down to Mozambique area. So the DNA, unfortunately, if we can trust it, and I think we can, did not show any similarities between the Falasha and the Lemba. But and according to the results that I saw, the Falasha made a religious shift. And I think there are many stories about, I mean, the Queen of Sheba and Solomon. So they might be, maybe later DNA tests may show us differently. But the Lemba, definitely some of them went to Ethiopia, others came lower down. You know, they made use of the monsoon winds from the eastern Hadramaut. If that boat, 3 months of the year, the monsoon winds blew in the direction of either, it depends on which highway you took by boat. It took you to Ethiopia, the Horn of Africa, or lower down to Mozambique, Sofala. And there they traded. So some came down on foot from Ethiopia down southwards.
Yes.
And remained here after they couldn't go back to Arabia. I think that was about 600, before 600 AD they came, at least before 600 AD they came to Africa and stayed here.
That's wonderful, wonderful information. Thank you for sharing that. Welcome, Modi.
Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, that's better. Yes, thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. I had said good evening, Dr. Magdel. Good afternoon, Ms. Pat. And good day to all attendees. Thank you for joining us today for our educational webinar for Before Slavery. So we were on question number 4.
3.
Number 3. All right. So
Okay, all four. It doesn't matter.
All right, so we were going to ask about the Buba people, whom, when we were going through your articles, they also came up alongside the Lemba, and we've been really fascinated about multiple communities that also have a similar story with the Lemba. So who are these, the Buba people, and what are their similarities with the Lemba?
Okay, Modi, yes, I wanted to clarify that the Buba is just one of the clans of the Lemba people.
Mm.
And they are the priestly family of the Lemba. And I think you will later ask me about the genetic and DNA tests that's been done in a later question. I think it's question 9 or somewhere. So I don't want to go into that now. But the Buba were the priestly family of the Lemba. And they were the people who actually led them through down into the Arabian Peninsula and into Africa. So that was their main leadership at that stage. But in all rituals, even today, the people are the people who are actually present at the rituals, specific rituals, the circumcision, and all those kind of practices.
All right. So, to what extent do the customs that sustain the Lemba, to what extent do the customs, as you expressed before, the feast, the diet, the prayer, the way of doing things, even the way they marry, the way they pass down stories from generation to generation, to what extent have these customs preserved the Lemba as a unique group, being surrounded by all these other groups that look like them, but over centuries they've maintained their identity? So to what extent do these customs have played a part, and how do they play a part, for example?
Oh, it is absolutely fascinating. And that was one of my articles I wrote was on the oral traditions of the Lemba. And I determined that some of their customs and traditions are more than 2,000 years old. And I mean, it is, you know, and in modern in Europe and so on, they would tell you, I mean, even in America, the first world, they will tell you that an oral tradition can't last longer than 100 years in a family or in whatever. So, I mean, really in Africa, and you will know better than me, in Africa, around the fire, people tell the stories, and they keep those stories perfectly preserved through their songs, prayers, recitations, isn't it?
That's right.
Exactly, and that's a mnemonic device to keep the what do you call it, the essence of that tradition intact, and convey it from one generation to a next generation, and it was amazing to see how I could, in certain aspects, that's also a long story, but determine that this tradition that is also exists, for instance, in Yemen, and that was recorded by Arabs, is more than 1,000 years old. Exactly the same. Like, for instance, the new moon ceremony. It's being described in Yemen, in their ancient recordings, that this group of people who left Yemen for Africa, who were goldsmiths and coppersmiths and so on, those people from Sena, they celebrated the new moon ceremony in this way, and they still do it today, for instance. There are many more examples, but so they were, I don't know if you heard this part, but I said the Lemba were always very exclusive, very creative, very, devoted to their culture, and their manners and practices and everything. So that kept them alive, and that kept their traditions and their culture alive through many, many years.
And that's right. And that also relates to what Evangelist Hamandishe, who's from the Lemba group, described as well, that they, even when it comes to marriages, it's just that by the recent generations, people are now marrying outside of their group. But they were saying that it was a strict rule to marry within the Lemba, because a Lemba and a Lemba share cultures and customs that they would pass down. And if you don't marry outside, that ensures the preservation of their ways to keep it in the family. That's very interesting. So in your research, what have you found to be the very strong correspondence between the African Judaism with the Old Testament? And what do the recordings of the Jewish travelers tell us about the correspondences between African customs and tradition and the Old Testament?
I couldn't hear your last words, Mari.
So what do the records of the Jewish travelers tell us about the correspondences between African customs and traditions and the Old Testament?
Okay, now I immediately want to tell you that I couldn't find much Jewish writers or Jewish travelers at that stage, except for the Lemba. But I mean, many Arab, Portuguese, and later Dutch travelers, observers, travelers, traders, and so on. Observers who wrote about their awareness of this group of people who were different from the others. They looked different. They were lighter, much lighter skin. They wore these long white robes. They are even somewhere in Mapungubwe, close to Mapungubwe, in a cave. I couldn't find it, but I saw a picture of a very early traveler who made a picture, who made a sketch of it, and of these people that showed, you depicted them clearly. But in any case, they thought they were Moorish people. They were described by these Arab people as Moorish because of their clothes, but they said they do not observe, they do not know the creed of Muhammad, they do not observe all that things of Muhammad that were prescribed, but they were definitely different. They conduct a circumcision, they celebrate the new moon ceremony, and they've got, and even I think it was 1105, one of the Al-Idrishi Arab, I think he was also a geographer, what do you say? He wrote down, he said that the Lemba had a god named Elubrim or something like that, very close to Elohim, that means in the Old Testament. So there are some recordings, you know, of those very early observers on the east coast of Africa. But of course, I mean, there are many similarities between the manners and customs and practices of the Lemba and the Old Testament people. I can keep you busy until midnight. But you want quickly?
We want to learn. What are some of those?
Okay, so I can start by the dietary laws. You know the typical dietary laws of the Jewish people. And I must immediately tell you that they are more Israelite than Jewish. They are not, do not observe modern Judaism.
Right.
They are people who are converted to modern Judaism or to Judaism, so whatever. They told me we are Israelites. And you know, after my study, the Old Testament tribes with these people comparison clearly showed most of their customs and practices are pre-Talmudic. That means before 200 AD. And even modern Judaism, modern Jews today don't celebrate, for instance, the new moon ceremony the similar way anymore. They adjusted it over the years and make it more, you know, to their own liking and so on. So it changed. There was much inner Jewish migration within those customs and practices of modern Judaism, but not with the Lemba. They were not exposed to it. They were not exposed to it in Africa. So they kept very, very old pre-Talmudic manners and custom, Israelite customs, dietary laws, very close to Leviticus 13, the marital laws, endogamy, the dowry, you know, all those, the Levirate marriage, the burial customs, they still bury, I don't know today, but when I did my research 20 years, almost 30 years ago, they buried the same way as the ancient Israelites, with a tomb-like and with different, not tomb-like, what do you call it, a chamber with benches where they dried out the body and then put it into different chambers and so on. So all those things are really so typical. Also the circumcision, and don't ask me exactly about that, but it is pre-Talmudic. The way they did it in the ancient times, they don't do it the same way the modern Jews today. The new moon ceremony. We don't know much about the new moon ceremony in the Old Testament, but when I studied the Lemba and observed how they do it, I could for the first time understand what the Old Testament celebration was all about. So it meant to me a lot as an Old Testament scholar to be able to interpret the Old Testament in a much better way. They are a kind of a living source to me. They were kind of a living source to me to see these people still have these manners and customs. It was absolutely fascinating to me.
Wow, that is amazing. Oh, wow, you have been on an adventure.
Absolutely. I can't tell you. It was absolutely, it was a gem to me, you know, and I couldn't stop. I mean, I've written so much about it, and but I mean, I always encourage the Lemba people, please write down your own stories, you know, in Africa. And I'm telling people that know better than myself, but in Africa, an old man is like a library. Or a woman. If he or she dies, a library burns down.
That's right.
The oral traditions. It's so important that we write it down and that we, you know, in this way also, of course, I mean, in this way we can capture, we can preserve these oral traditions, because people, as you say, you know, they are not keeping it up anymore, the culture and the traditions, and it will just be lost for the next generation.
That's right. That's right. That's what we have to do. And even as we are, as before slavery right now, we are trying to recollect history, because it's so shocking that among all the histories of all the cultures around the world, African history is the least studied. And when scholars are trying to gather pre-modern history on Africa, it's just the one that has been twisted, or the one that does not reflect the richness of the cultures that were there before, or the real identities of the people. It's just like from someone else's perspective. It's, some people may say it's whitewashed, but we need to be recording our own histories. That's beautiful. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us, so that we can start reconstructing our history as a people as well. We really appreciate it. So just to introduce ourselves again, our organization, we are Before Slavery Exhibit, and we are based in Atlanta, Georgia. We have been creating museum projects in Atlanta to educate more on pre-colonial and pre-slavery history, just to try to give Black people a glimpse into their past, their identities, rather than, and try to change the narrative from, oh, you were slaves, or you were colonized, to knowing themselves before they were these people that they've been known to be, so that they can reclaim their identity. And we deeply believe that it also contributes to the betterment of the health of African American people, and also the Black diaspora, because identity is tied to personal well-being of people. You can be proud of who you are if you know where you come from, if you know your ancestors were once great travelers, miners, sculptors. So we are creating this, we've been creating these museum projects, and in 2022, in April, we'll be opening an actual museum in Macon, Georgia, alongside the Harriet Tubman Museum. So that's a big project, and we've been doing webinars since November, just to bring scholars together of African history and bring our resources together, and also promote and ask for community assistance, whether financial or resources, intellectual resources, so that we can. We are opening our museum in April 2022 alongside the Harriet Tubman Museum. So we've been doing webinars since November to bring scholars together and bring resources together, so that we can build momentum towards the opening of the museum in April 2022. You may visit our website at www.beforeslavery.com and check out more of our work. And you can feel free to email. I'll leave the email towards the end. So we'll proceed to the next question. So most scholars and researchers agree that recognition of oral histories by institutions do play a fundamental role in creating a wider, deeper understanding and appreciation for African history. What more can be done to put this into practicality in this attention economy, especially for the Black diaspora audience? So we are in an attention economy. How can, as historians, what can we do to really get the attention of people to this important info? You get what I'm trying to put across?
No, that's very important to me. You know, I've written many articles on the value and the importance of oral traditions, oral history. You know, some people will say it's myth. You know, for instance, there is a story of the Lemba that they had the Ngoma Lungundu. They actually carried it for the Venda people from the north in Africa down to the south. But it functioned exactly like the Ark of the Covenant. Of the Covenant. It wasn't. It was only to be carried by the priestly family, not to be touched, not to touch the ground. Nobody else were allowed to touch it, and old stories, and it had an effect on the enemy, just like the Ark of the Covenant in the Old Testament. You know, many people would say, "Oh no, that's really a nice story, but that's nonsense. It's just a myth, you know, and this and that." But as I've said, I've proven so many times that the oral traditions there is always a truth to this myth, and that's why I call it, and many other scholars, myth history. So of course there are some nuances here and there, you know, that might, of course, we all add to a good story. You know, why, as we've always said, why would you spoil a good story with facts? But that's not what it is in Africa. Because of these mnemonic devices, like songs, prayers, recitations, it is being conveyed from generation to generation for more than 1,000 years. We should take it into consideration, and it should be written down. We should interview our old people. And that's why I'm always encouraging people to do that. It's so crucial for African history to be taken seriously.
So one of the ways that we can gather these stories is through interviews, recording them.
Interviews. Absolutely. Absolutely. We should really, we all have cell phones. Go to your grandpa, ask him about his history. You know, really, I mean, when he dies, it's gone. So it's so important to record those things and do the research of your people and your tribe or whoever.
That's very profound. That's very profound. So may you would tell us more about more African groups, well, through your research, if you've come across any that have been genetically proven to have their ancestry in ancient Israel?
Yes, of course. I mean, I think your previous speaker was Dr. Eddie Bruder, and she did her doctorate. I met her in 2000. She was in Africa. She interviewed me and so on. And she did her doctorate on all the Jewish groups in Africa. And I'm sure you've got her book also available. She did very, very fascinating work. You know, all the sub-Saharan actually Jewish connected groups. But even in Morocco, there are Berbers. You know more than myself, better than myself. There are so many groups in Africa. But in South Africa, as far as I know, it's only the Lemba people. Yeah. And in Zimbabwe. In South Africa and Zimbabwe, of course.
So this just basically tells us that the migrations happened everywhere. They moved everywhere. They moved east.
Yes.
They moved west as they left Israel. So they are, wow, spread all over.
Yes, for many reasons, many different reasons. For the Lemba, it was to escape the exile, most probably. For others, many Jewish groups into the sub-Saharan area, like the Yoruba and the Hosa and those. I also wrote an article on that, the ancient Near Eastern influence in sub-Saharan Africa. I think it was published in the journal Pharos, Pharos, in 2009 or some. I can't remember exactly the date, but and that was also fascinating to see the influence of the ancient Near East. And I'm talking about Canaanite influence, of course, Israelite, and other influence in the sub-Saharan area. And what brought them here was trade. The the ancient Israelites, and of course the Egyptians and so on, but more the ancient Israelites, they were traders. They were traders. Canaanite means trader, by the way. The Canaanites, Israelites, I think they are very closely related, but mainly in the sub-Saharan area is definitely trade, and of course on the east coast of Africa. And you know that they already circumnavigated Africa from the east to the west, about 600 AD, BC.
Wow.
And not Bartolomeus Diaz, the Portuguese, who did it the first time from the west to the east. And it's being described in ancient sources.
Oh, wow. And it's absolutely fascinating because, as I mentioned before in our previous meeting, the scholars who unearthed this book, this journal of a German barber surgeon who worked on the Dutch ships, he wasn't familiar with this group of people. And as you say, that he...
Talking about Doctors Zog and Koflowski, who co-wrote a book together detailing the notes from a barber / surgeon back in the 1700s. And they noted some people that they couldn't identify because they were Black, but they acted as though they were, for lack of a better word, what they would call Jewish. So the evidence, and that was on the West Coast. Which country, Modi, do you remember?
It was right above, their first stop from Spain.
Mm-hmm.
Those islands, they are
okay. All right. So like St. Thomas, yeah, and that there's a very unfortunate story there, but we won't go into all of that. Okay, so Modi, where were we headed next with our
So there was one last question about the recent phenomenon of more Africans and Black people converting to Judaism. So from an academic perspective, what are the underpinnings of that recent phenomenon of a new generation of African and Black people deciding to be affiliated with Judaism?
My opinion, in my humble opinion, it is because these African people, for some reason or another, their manners and customs are so closely related to the Old Testament. And when the missionaries came with the New Testament, and they later discovered that there is a thicker book, the Old Testament, that's more valuable, is more powerful, more authority. Many people really, and they told me that many times, they thought, but that is the more authentic book, and these manners and customs are more closely related to ours. Why can't we go that way? So somebody said to me, if missionaries came in the first place with the Old Testament first, they would have converted all of them to Christianity. But they later discovered that the mistakes the missionaries also did wonderful work, but I don't want to go there, but they abandoned, unfortunately, some of them abandoned some of the African manners and customs. Instead of, they could have won them over if they said, listen, look at in the Old Testament, you are so close to the Old Testament practices and so on. And you there might have been some influence or even genetic, relationship between you and the Jewish people or the Israelites or whatever. But in any case, what I'm saying is that I think that is the reason that so many people fall more familiar and closer to the Old Testament manners and customs. That's my theory, and that's why they kind of relate more closely to the Old Testament and the Judaism. I once on one I can't remember where it was, or conference, I said, the Lemba people claim to be Jews. Oh, and a Jewish person, she nearly fainted. She said, who on earth would claim to be a Jew?
Wow.
From the background of anti-Semitism and all that kind of things, and I had to correct that and say, sorry, well, that is what they say. I only want to say that is their opinion about themselves, and it still needs to be investigated. And we did some of it with the genetic research. Maybe I can just tell quickly something about that. The genetic test that's been done, if you want to.
Yes, please do.
Okay, so yes, because you'd asked me about the Buba. So when I started my research in, well, actually not started, I was almost finished my research for my doctorate on the Lemba people. I did some, what do you call it, field work in South Africa and in Zimbabwe, in the southern parts of Zimbabwe, because those people are related to each other. And there was an international project going on the oldest genetic pool in the world. And Professor Palford from England knew that I was busy doing field work, and they approached me and asked if I would gather the DNA samples from the different groups. And that was in 1997, before some of you were born, perhaps. And so we did all these samples, and from the inside of the mouth, you know, with a like an earbud almost, and we put it in the stuff that they send us, and it showed, the outcome was, the result was that especially the Buba, the priestly family of the Lemba, had the pattern of the Y chromosome on their DNA was exactly the same as the Kohanim. The Kohanim are the priestly family of the Israelites. Kohen is priest, Kohanim. And you could only become a priest if your father was a priest. So, and the Kohanim are the descendants of Aaron, the brother of Moses. Not the Levites, but the brother of Aaron. And you could only become a priest if your father was a priest. So all these people with the same pattern on the Y chromosome are all descendants of Aaron, the brother of Moses. And they could determine that they not only came from the Middle East, but that they specifically came from Israel. And we found their place, Sena and Lemba, two cities that they never knew where it was. We found it in excavation in close to Jericho, in Moab, in in what do you call it, Jordan, close to Madeba, and that's exactly. And they never knew there was a city called Lemba as well. So Lemba and Sena were found in Jordan of today.
Wow!
Wow! That's I didn't know that.
Me either. You just gave me goosebumps. Pimples.
It was absolutely fascinating when we discovered that, because you know what, and the joke is, it was always on ancient maps, in all our maps on their shelves. It was found, Dr. Wapnick, a Jew from Pretoria, Jewish person from Pretoria, contacted me in 1999. He said, "Do you know there is a place called Sena on the map of Macmillan Bible Atlas page, this and that?" I said, "No, I never saw it. You know, you always thought not to look for it." And I found it there. And then one of my students, Rabbi Richard Newman from the Cape, he was a doctoral student of mine and obviously interested in the Jewish stuff. So he looked in an another old atlas, the Oxford Bible Atlas, and he found on the same map next to Sena, he found Lemba.
Wow.
And I approached the archaeologist there. I think it's I can't remember if it's Diva or somebody. It was quite a while ago. And he said, yes, but we can't excavate there because it's a modern city is built on top of it.
Wow. Thank you so much. Oh, this is
so that confirms the oral tradition. You know,
that's right.
More than 2,000 years old. More than 2,000 years old.
Confirmation.
They didn't know it was on a map, and it was found and it was confirmed.
Wow. So someone in the question and answer box asked, I just wonder to what extent modern Jewish scientists know about and not acknowledge the existence of the Lemba. Like modern Jewish scientists, maybe and beyond.
Scientists, I can't tell. But I'm telling you, there was some resistance in the beginning. But after the DNA, the chief rabbi of America, the Kulanu organization, flew here. He wanted me to have my book, and I gave him my book, and he was excited, and he wanted to erect synagogues here and teach them and convert them back to Judaism. According, so there was another long story. But the thing is, they're supporting them now in many ways. The Lemba and some converted because, and some of them said, "Why should we convert? We are black Jews."
Right.
So it's interesting. It is a fascinating. It is an ongoing story. Somebody asked about my book. They can email me. I think you can give them my email address, and then I can tell them I don't want to take up more time. I think we're going to go off the air soon.
All right, that's fine. So
it's 21 hours.
Mr. Brewster, I'm going to email you her email address so that you can communicate. Thank you so much for your question.
Any other questions? You're welcome to email me. I will answer you via email if you want to. Sorry, I talk too much.
Enjoyed it so much.
You are welcome. You're welcome. We used to have these webinars for about an hour, 15 minutes, an hour, 30 minutes. Then we cut them short thinking that people would, it was too long. But then I guess we gotta bring them back to 1 hour, 15 minutes.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Magdel. I hand over back to you, Ms. Pat.
And perhaps we can invite you back because there's more to share, you know, and we would love to do that. And we just thank you so much, Dr. Magdel, for sharing your research with us and your experience and the things that you uncovered. And we appreciate your efforts and your dedication. So I hope that everyone here will reach out when the book is available. Actually, I think you can get some. I've seen some on Amazon, but hopefully it will be more readily available soon. And as Modesta said a little earlier, please also support our ongoing efforts to build the museum before slavery. I put a link in the chat box. You can click there, and any amount that you donate, it will be greatly appreciated and go straight to artifacts and curating other materials to put in the museum. Of course, it is tax deductible. That's another thing I would like for you to keep in mind. So we hope to see you at our next webinar, which is Sunday, June 6th, right here at 2 p.m. Look for a registration link in your email address, inbox. At that program, we'll be unveiling the winners of the Before Slavery Black History Poetry Slam. So I don't know how many people were there when we did that live in February for Black History Month, but those young poets have put together heartfelt and very moving poetry, and we will be unveiling the winners of that challenge in our next event, which is Sunday, June 6th, 2 p.m. Eastern time. So adjust it for your time zone. From our last webinar, we did have, actually not from the webinar, but from our Black History quiz poll, we do have a win. The winner was Mark Duncan. Mark was the winner of the Black History quiz bowl, and Amazon gift card was already sent to Mark. So congratulations, Mark Duncan. Yay. And we will be enjoying some other challenges coming up very soon. We will be inviting musicians from the diaspora all over the globe. We ask you to bring out your music that will kind of motivate people to move. We hope that it will be upbeat and something that will be inspirational. So listen for that in the coming days. Special thanks to our sponsors, WPGN Syndicated Radio, which broadcasts in 180 markets, and WONI, WONI Radio, who will broadcast our content all over the world. So I turn it back over. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate you coming, and we look forward to seeing you again. Special thanks, Dr. Magdel. We're just grateful that you shared with us, and we hope maybe to have you back again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So follow us on Facebook. The recording will be available on Tuesday. On our YouTube, we'll send you an email.
Oh, and please answer the survey at the end of this webinar. Bye-bye.
Thank you.